Welcome to the Movie Geeks United 20th anniversary celebration of David Fincher's Seven. In this episode, we'll be replaying our roundtable discussion of the film, first recorded in 2010, which also features an interview with one of the film's producers, Phyllis Carlyle.
I just went through my closet and I dug out, I have the Faber and Faber 7 and 8mm script in book form, and I read the interview with Andrew Kevin Walker, which, if you haven't read, it might be online somewhere, but it's very fascinating. I remember actually reading this when I first got this, which was been 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, and it's just fascinating to read his thoughts on not just the two movies, but also on the other movies he worked on, but also just his path to how he became a screenwriter, what influenced him and everything. Some really nice insights. But it's that scene in the car is just fascinating for a multitude of reasons, and we'll get into that later.
We definitely will. And with Andrew Kevin Walker, this was his entry into the business. Mm-hmm. We don't see a lot of him now like we did, because he was like the hot commodity after Seven. Every screenplay of the horror genre, even though it doesn't.
I think this transcends. This is like Silence of the Lambs. I think.
Yes.
Transcends that.
So we'll be talking about all the talents involved and the different aspects of this film. First of all, let me say the new classic series. We have 2 other episodes included in this series so far: Heat, which was our first new classic, and Casino. And Casino tribute, featuring our interview with Frank Vincent, is currently. Yeah, he was a colorful guy. That is currently our featured archived episode of the week. You'll see it there on our homepage. Mm-hmm. And now tonight's Seven. What do these 3 films have in common, Jerry?
I saw them in 1995 in a span of 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. 95 was a great year. I keep going back to that year.
That fall season was spectacular. There's no doubt about that. We picked 3 of the big films now.
Yeah.
Of that period.
And you even go earlier in the year, and you have Leaving Las Vegas and Dead Man Walking. You have Bridges of Madison County.
Right.
It was a great year for movies. On and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was spectacular. It really was. There's just so many great films to
I remember watching the trailer to Seven and thinking, my God, that looks incredibly visual. Mm-hmm. But it looks like a standard serial killer movie. So that was my impression walking into it. Mm-hmm. And actually watching the movie, I'll tell you my experience of it, then you can share yours.
Yeah, sure.
Actually watching the movie, well, first of all, it was my movie theater days, so I was managing the movie theater, and we would screen the movies the night before it opened. So the opening credits come on, and gullible me, I thought something was wrong with the projector. So because our projectors were haunted, they constantly ate up film. So I ran up to the projection booth and I said, "Oh, that's like a stylistic thing." I was just so programmed to think that something was wrong if there was jerkiness in the frame.
Right.
So so that set me off guard from the beginning, and I was just so incredibly taken by the look of the film. And it actually is one of the very few films that I can honestly say I was on the edge of my seat. I was literally on the edge of my seat. There's only one other kind of film experience I can think of that had me like that, and that was the hypodermic scene in Pulp Fiction when I first saw that.
Right.
But this one, you don't know what's going to happen. And yet, when you watch it a second time, all the pieces are there, and it should be fairly obvious. Mm-hmm. Everything's set up. This screenplay is structured in a way, it's ingenious.
It really is.
It's a puzzle that fits perfectly, I think. Mm-hmm. On every level, thematically, emotionally.
Yeah.
And it stayed number 1 for 7 weeks, I think.
No, it did very well. It came out of it really, and it also not that I'm not by no means want to trivialize this, but at the time, Brad and Gwyneth were a couple, and it does seem that Brad Pitt, through the majority of my, like, from my 20s and my 30s, has always been, like, part of these, like, you kind of almost, these, like, couples, idealistic couples. And these great, and, you know, and this is the beginning, I guess, of Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, they were the it couple at this time. And I didn't know what to expect. I had read Peter Travers' review in Rolling Stone, and that really gave nothing away. I didn't know much about the film before walking in. I will say this, I was really nervous because a whole bunch of high school kids came in the film. I was like, oh, great, they're going to be talking throughout this whole thing. I mean, it was sold out, dead silence throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
Everyone was just so in, I think, awe, shocked. They had not seen, this is not your typical weekend horror film that I think everyone's so used to, you know, regardless of what time period you live in. But I think no one had seen anything like this for quite some time. And, you know, the movie keeps throwing curveballs at you. And I also think, you know, it's like one of those things, I don't know if you could do, I know they did this with the cameo, the Bill Murray cameo in Zombieland for a while. I don't know if today you could keep Kevin Spacey's role a secret with the internet.
Probably not. And this it was kept a secret at Kevin Spacey's request.
Yeah, I mean, it you couldn't do that today. I don't know how you could do that. And it's such a pivotal character and everything. But you were just like, holy shit, that's Kevin Spacey. It's guys as
yeah, and I remember hearing the voice on the phone when they find John Doe's apartment and thinking, gosh, that sounds like Kevin Spacey. And David Fincher took it, I mean, even in the trailer, there's that scene where I want to tell you more about it. I don't want to ruin the surprise when he's talking to them on the phone. David Fincher dubbed that voice for the trailer so it wouldn't give anything away.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a real, like, clever hat trick. And so it gives it a real jolt. The one thing that, there's two things that really pop to mind when I think of Seven. The first is how it takes predictable elements of the genre, whether it be detective genre or serial killer genre, and it turns them on their head.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, I had a teacher years ago that watched the movie. He said it's just a very good cop movie, and I said no. You don't see how revolutionary this movie is in terms of the turns it takes. Mm-hmm. You have two characters that are stock in most movies: the brash young hothead, and the wizened old man that's about to retire. Mm-hmm. For some reason, the elevation of the performances, the writing, they don't feel stock. They so perfectly complement one another, and their personalities come from somewhere truthful, I think.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
You feel they're genuine. They're not playing stock. The killer gives himself up halfway through the movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, where the hell is this movie going? I mean, this is unheard of. The detectives are an essential part of the killer's plan.
Right. It is.
And there's all of these elements. It's mostly set in like this really dark, depressing, unnamed city. That's where it's constantly raining.
He said New York. Walker said in this interview that it's his like sort of like love-hate song to New York City.
But I don't think they specify it in the film,
no,
and I think the film's all the stronger for it.
No, it was very smart not to. It was really smart not to.
Yeah, and yet you have that as a setup, and yet the most intense part of the movie, that final scene, takes place in the wide open, in the sun.
Yeah.
The 7 o'clock hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 7 pops up constantly in this film.
Yeah.
And then you have a device, and it really is like a gimmick device of 7 deadly sins. But it is just part of the marrow of the film and the characters' journeys. So on every level, the movie works for me and transcends the conventions of these genres.
I agree. I don't think I couldn't have said it better. I mean, that's what it is. It transcends the genre. And all the very, and genre films are good within themselves, but when you have something that takes place in the genre and then can elevate it, I mean, the obvious example is the Godfather films. Yes, at the you know, on the surface they're gangster films, but there's so much more. They made the ultimate testament to the ultimate cinematic family epics. I don't think I've ever seen a stronger representation of family on the screen than those films. So Seven is like that. Seven, okay, you think, okay, there's going to be like your standard cat and mouse serial killer movie, and the thing is, it's not. You will go a month after its release, you will see that in a movie called Copycat, which I do like. I like Copycat,
right?
But that's a very good genre film, I think. But it doesn't have the element. It has a great cast, but it doesn't have the elements of Seven. That Seven just takes it up several notches.
And then you find the copycats of Seven, like for years after Seven came out, right down to the opening title sequence. Now every movie had to have the coolest title sequence possible.
Give some examples.
Well, I can't, because most of them are forgettable horror movies. Yeah, that's just how it is. If I really thought about it, I could come up with something.
No, I was just curious if you had any offhand. No,
but I appreciate you putting me on the spot. Yeah.
No, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was curious what you meant, because I know everyone wanted the next Seven, and Seven did also, not only was critically hailed, but also did incredibly well. It made over $100 million, which is an incredible feat.
Well, in a way, I'm sure 8mm was developed as writing on the coattails of Seven. I mean, literally, because
it was. He's very, and Joel Schumacher had no greater fan than Andrew Kevin Walker. I mean, he says that, but they just, it seems like Schumacher had his own ideas for the movie. And I was telling my mom this earlier tonight. I cried at the end of 8mm. She's like, why? Because it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I thought it would be. I was really pissed off because I had high hopes for it. Because I love
if you want the best version of 8mm, see Hardcore. But
no, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But what's sad about it is that obviously the screenwriter is a very good screenwriter, and in that movie there are seeds of what could have been a truly great movie, which is just really, unfortunately, turns out to be run-of-the-mill.
Right.
And we've talked about this on the show. We said, I remember after the movie saying, God, if only Fincher had directed this, or let's be very honest, it was the perfect material for De Palma. I mean, there's no getting around that.
8mm was, yeah.
Yeah, it has his name all over it. But Schumacher tried it, and the results are mixed.
But also something that carried over into 8mm and other films, I mean, beyond the title sequences, was darkness.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this impending gloom and darkness.
Mm-hmm. In both films. He says bleakness was the word he used is in both films.
And I think that was a major influence that carried over into a lot of other genre movies.
Mm-hmm.
This one is very bleak. Obviously, Seven is. But it is... Another way it transcends that gimmick of the Seven Deadly Sins, the movie is about sin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what the movie is. It's about sin. And even when I like how they're in the wide open field at the end of it, because it shows you that no matter where you are, you could be in the middle of nowhere in a wide open field, you're still surrounded by sin. So I like that element of the ending as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the second thing that I was really taken by, speaking about the look, was the cinematography. This was Darius Kunjai.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful looking film.
And it's gorgeous in that I've never seen a film that looks so desecrated almost. It almost looks like the print was urinated on, and yet
You're right.
It is so beautiful because it is so intrinsically tied in to the material that they are perfectly meshed.
Right.
The look of the film and the theme of the film.
The only other film I can really think of that is like that, if you want to use that term, is the French movie Irreversible, which is like shot in that kind of manner, in a style where he looks like, it looks like someone urinated on the print. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's very interesting, and it is a beautifully bleak shot film. I mean, there's no getting around that, especially that you talk about the scene, the open fields at the end. There's no getting around it. And it's so beautiful, and the irony is it's something so horrific is about to be discovered. Which I still can't get over. There's also another thing, watching it again a couple of weeks ago, that really stands out, and that's Morgan Freeman's performance.
Uh-huh.
And I have to bring this out because I do like Morgan Freeman a lot, and I know that you like him a lot. You liked him probably longer than any of us because of Street Smart.
Right.
You really go way back with him. But he hasn't been typecast quite yet when he makes this movie, and there's something he is the heart and soul of the film. He's very, let's be very honest, he's very cynical, but at the same time, he's trying to fight that cynicism, but he can't. It's very hard. But he hasn't taken on the things that he'll get typecast like a $1 Million Baby or Bruce Almighty or films like that, or
I mean,
he's
sometimes
a
I think
three-dimensional character.
Is Morgan Freeman typecast or is his voice typecast? I mean, I think Morgan Freeman is often hired because of that voice of authority. Mm-hmm. In Seven, it's very cautious. Mm-hmm. It's not confidence. It's weariness.
It's weariness, but it's something look, I love him in Invictus. I don't think he can. I mean, even in the parts that we say he is typecast, he's still very good. But it's just here he is. There's an authority about him that, I guess it was a year before that the Shawshank Redemption came on. You could say with that particular role, maybe that's where that typecast begins. Not that I think that's a magnificent performance, but it's in Seven we just don't see, people don't give him that part as much as we would like to see. He's so good, and his performance, and he acts opposite everyone so well in the film. He interacts with everyone beautifully. Mm-hmm. And it's just the looks he gives. Like you say, weariness is the perfect word.
It would be such a lesser film without him, and Brad Pitt's performance would work so much less without him.
That you're right.
Because Brad Pitt is phenomenal in the movie. And when you think of how this role could be played, mm-hmm. I mean, you could see it being played very one note. You could see Charlie Sheen coming in and playing the rookie hotshot cop, like he did in The Rookie, and you could see the attitude and the forced attitude. With Brad Pitt's performance, it's just so organic. It is him, mm-hmm. He is that character in the film. It's seamless, and I love when it comes out. Yeah. Like when he kicks Joe's apartment door down, and against Morgan Freeman's wishes.
Yeah.
Because he's just pissed off, and Morgan Freeman's reaction, like, you're stupid, and that whole collaboration, that whole relationship between the two of them feels so authentic to me. And another reason why Brad Pitt's arrogance, his character's propensity to fly off the handle, mm-hmm. Works so well for the film is because it's so important to mm-hmm. the film. It is his sin. It is his sin.
Yeah.
You're
absolutely
so that's the main reason why it makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to talk about with this movie, but let's hear this interview that we did for the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, our home entertainment correspondent conducted this interview recently with one of the producers of Seven. Her name is Phyllis Carlyle, and she actually was the first one to get a hold of the script and develop it. And she also produced another film, which I hope we do on a future new classic series, The Accidental Tourist.
Mm-hmm. No, that'd be very good to do.
So, I mean, she's got two golden movies on her resume, these two, so she can't lose with me. Here's Phyllis talking about the genesis of Seven, the development of it, and the reaction to it, including the reaction to that head in the box scene, which we got to talk about after this. Here she is.
The draft, I got the draft as a first draft from a first-time writer, and it was handed to me by a man named Jim Burkus, who was a partner at UTA. And he gave it to me because he was trying to sign a directing client of mine, and he thought that if he gave me the script and I could produce it, and the client liked it, that would be a way for him to have some points in signing him.
So what was the process of you getting involved with it? What was the next step?
It was handed to me to produce, so that's how I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
I did indeed show it to my client, and he liked it, and he came on board at that point to be the director. The script had already been seen by most of the studios, and I think I tried, and looking back, I think I tried to take it to a couple of people I knew at the studios, and they all said, you know what, we understand this is good, but we can't do this. Mm-hmm. Now, at that time, the script was different from the script that got shot. So when they said they can't do it, it was really what they were referring to certainly was some of the ways the Seven Sins were depicted, and the toughness of the story in the city wasn't somebody's head in a box.
Mm-hmm.
That came much later.
So at some point, I guess your client is no longer attached to the project.
Well, that was several years later.
Right. And so what finally did it to where, I guess New Line obviously is the ones that finally did it. What finally got them to for a studio, even like New Line, to say, we're going to make it?
Well, I set the project up with a company called Penta, which was an Italian company. At that particular point in my own development, I had grown to have a great love for what we'll just call international, and the companies in different countries that did things and how it could all work together. And so this was a sort of a passion of mine at this point, and was something I was very anxious to make work. And since the studios were showing no interest in this script, I did give it to this company that had just sort of been formed. It was Berlusconi and Cecchigori were partners. And they threw a lot of money into this company and opened an office in L.A. And I gave it to, at that point, the man running the company was Johnny Nunari, who later did 300, and I think he's part of Shutter Island now as well. And so I gave it to him to read, and he liked it because my own personal feeling was that the studios, of course, weren't going to love this, but that the European market would not be afraid of it and would get it. So that seemed to be true when they responded, and they set it up, and they had money, and we started developing it. So we spent about a year and a half developing it, and my client got sort of tired of the sort of Italianness of it all, and he said, you know what, I'm going to go do something else. So I kept developing it and working on it, and then when we thought our script was ready, I had already contacted some German companies and was trying to bring some of the financing in from Europe. When now by this time they had spent all their money at Penta, and Cecchigori and Berlusconi wanted to disband it and lay everything off. So so Johnny said, well, we got to go to the studios with this. And I said, I don't want to do that. And he said, well, how else are we going to get the movie made? And I said, well, we can do this, this, and this. And he said, no, I really want to try and lay it off at a studio. So I had a deal at Paramount for about 3 years, and that was one of the studios that they had wanted me to take it to, and John Goldwyn was the president of production at the time. So I found myself in a meeting with John on this script, and he said to me, "Listen, this is pretty tough material. We're going to need to tame it a little." And I said, "John, you've got 20 projects like that, and that you're already developing. The only reason to make this movie is to make this movie. Otherwise, you just have another cop story, and it won't matter. And I don't want to do that." So, needless to say, Paramount said no, and Pinta got pissed off at me. And and at this point, we had Johnny Depp and Denzel Washington slightly interested, but they wanted to each sit down and give notes. And I went, "Oh my God, that's another 3 years." And so I called a friend of mine, Kevin Yvain at CAA, and I said, "I want you to read this script because it could be right for Brad Pitt." So he read it and he said, "I really like this." And he said, "I think Brad will like it. If you get it, if you're set up at all," he said, "I'm going to show it to Brad." I said, "Okay." So about that time, Pinta started giving the script to other people because I wouldn't go to the studio. So they gave it to Arnold Kopelson, who had a deal at Warner Brothers at the time. And, well, they didn't give it to him. They gave it to his studio development, his development guy, Sanford Panich. And Sanford, I guess, showed it to Warner's. They turned it down again, and it was sitting there. And Lynn Harris from New Line called Sanford and asked if he had any scripts that he thought were good that Warner's wasn't doing. And I think they sent 3 or 4 things over to New Line, and Lynn liked 7. And so that's how that all got started.
Wow. Because kind of the right people finding it at the right time, I guess.
Well, New Line at that point had Mike DeLuca and some stuff, and it was really kind of cutting edge. They were really, if you were going to go kind of with a mini studio, they were the ones that were going to respond to this material, if somebody was. And so we went in, they said they wanted to do the movie, and we had meetings, and we talked about who should be in it, and I said, "Well, I think Brad Pitt will do it," and they told me I was crazy. And I said, "Well, no, actually, I think he will." And they contacted Kevin, and Kevin said yes, and so that's how that started to be real. And then we went 2 or 3 directors that were supposed to do it, and they all kind of ended up doing something else, and CAA kept pushing for us to meet with Fincher. And Fincher had screwed up Alien and had sort of blown his shot in the feature world for 2 or 3 years. And so they were really pushing for him to get this because they wanted to sort of revive his theatrical directing career, which of course it did.
Right. And so at what point, as you mentioned earlier, the Head in the Box thing came later. So at what point does the Head in the Box finale come into the story?
Well, we kept the same writer through the whole process. There was never a second writer on this film. Mm-hmm. So Andrew, this is Andrew Kevin Walker. So we didn't develop that much at New Line, but in the original script, for example, Brad Pitt's character dies, and Morgan Freeman's character does have an affair with his wife, and kind of, so there's things that got changed. So as we moved along in the developmental process, and it became, Brad lives and Morgan lives and everybody kind of stays friendly. I think it might have been David that came up with the idea with Kevin.
Hmm. And so who was the first person to get that version, and what was the reaction?
Well, we all got it at pretty much the same time. Well, I remember leaving a test screening with Arnold saying, "I can't believe I've made a movie with a woman with a head in a box. What am I, out of my mind?" And so everybody was. I mean, I think it was an uneasy idea that got made, and then everyone was completely unsure of it, and then it turned out that it worked.
The lore on Seven is that they did test it.
Yep.
And
twice.
And the numbers weren't good.
Right.
And so I'm curious. Maybe you have some insight into what does that mean that even though it didn't test well, I mean, Seven was. That's all that anyone talked about the fall of '95. So what does that say about the testing process?
Well, it says that the people that were in that room didn't like the movie.
Right.
They were not the only people. Honestly, when I think everybody was. Everybody thought going into the release of this movie that we were going to bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And the first premiere was in New York, not L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some friends there, and they all came with me, obviously. And after the movie, we got back in the limo, and they were all just sitting there staring at me. And I said, "Well, what did you think?" And they went, "Oh, God, Phyllis." I went, "Really? You really don't like it that much?" And they went, "Oh, no. It's just kind of gross and blah, blah." I said, I don't see it that way. I said, I think it could catch a chord. And if it catches a chord in people, and there's something going on right now that it might, in terms of the psyche and the mentality of people, I think then we'll have something. And I remember the first weekend it was in release, I was having dinner at the Ivy, and the people at the next table had seen it, and they were trashing it, completely trashing it, and saying awful things about it. And so we were all pretty convinced we were cooked gooses, and then suddenly it was a hit. And then it just didn't die. It just kept being number one, and it was kind of amazing, really. We were all shocked.
And I'm curious because I was 17 when the movie came out, and so I remember that was the talk of my high school. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if at the time no one was aware or took into consideration the fact that there was probably going to be a thing about, I guess, maybe younger viewers not being gun-shy about this material.
I think that New Line was a studio that was plugged into that thinking. Certainly Arnold wasn't. Arnold didn't even read the script until we were like halfway through the movie or something. We were almost done with casting, and he walked in one day and said, "This is good." He just got lucky, because they were trying to set it up at a studio. The script was sent to his company. So I think I give New Line the credit for understanding that audience. And I certainly give David Fincher the credit for knowing how to deliver this script. Mm-hmm. And after that, it tapped into all of that. Absolutely.
Because here it is, it's 15 years later, and I think Seven has become, despite I think at the time it got good reviews, but also scathing reviews, and as you said, some people loathed it. But
yes,
it is one of those films that I think has become. It's obviously become one of the more influential stylistically films.
Absolutely, I see it copied to this day all the time.
That's Phyllis Carlyle. She was a producer on Seven. A very enlightening, brief interview.
No, I didn't realize it was that brief, but it was for being brief. It was actually very informative because I did not know a lot of that stuff. So kudos to Erin for really getting a lot out of her.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, Denzel Washington, where the original casting choices directed by David Cronenberg, I think, was considered at one point for it.
And also, the guy was actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's funny you bring Johnny Depp in. The gentleman who was going to direct Seven went on to direct Benny and June, and I don't want to massacre his name, Jeremiah Chetnik or something.
Chetnik, who we've had on.
Yeah, I mean, so imagine what a different film.
Yeah.
That would have been. And that's not a slight on that director at all. It just would have been a very different film.
And who would have expected it? I mean, obviously when you watch Alien 3, it's the work of a talented visualist.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, a lot of people that came up from music videos, that was their strength.
Right.
So you really see that David Fincher knew that this was his shot, that he got a second chance. And he brought every talent he had in terms of narrative and even outside of the visuals to bear on this film. Another thing that I like about, I guess we should talk about the head in the box, but leading up to the head in the box, you know, the one purity in the movie is Gwyneth Paltrow, and the last time you see her in the movie, this is what I'm saying about when you watch it again. Which I've watched it so many times, as you have. When you watch it again, it's kind of obvious. You see the steps, the foreboding steps leading to that ending.
Because the last time see them.
Yeah, but they're there. They're not hidden. Like the last time you see her, it's just a quick shot of him lying down in bed next to her, kissing her. It's like a completely white-colored frame, and kissing her and saying, "I love you so much." And then that's the last time you see her.
Yeah.
But she's there for the remainder of the movie because when John Doe gives up, he's walking in there, and the person behind the desk said, "I'm not your answering service. Your wife's called and left these messages." And he picks up the messages, and then John Doe gives up behind them. He's shaving his chest or something, getting ready to ride John Doe out. And he says, "You know, if we keep working late like this, my wife's going to think something's up."
Right.
And then he's talking to the lawyer even before that.
Right.
And he's saying, "This guy's going to get cable television. My wife doesn't even have cable television." So she's like that constant presence. It's very clever. I mean, it's really clever. So I love that about it. Let me see if we're going to have a call.
We're going to have Dean, I think, is going to call in.
Dean, if you wanted to call in, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, now is the time to do it. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, but David Fincher absolutely turned a corner, and he's built on the promise of Seven since then, without question. So. Without question, and you know that everybody was probably trying to sell him the next serial killer movie after Seven. And it's to his credit that he hasn't bitten it. You know,
he hasn't bitten it. And
people expected Zodiac to be that. You know?
And Zodiac is just so much more in a different direction, but Zodiac is, I don't even know. Even other days I'm tempted to say Zodiac is his masterpiece.
Right.
I really am, because Zodiac, you know, I was looking forward to it, but I didn't expect to be blown away the way I was. I was really caught up in every character's story. And I think it was because while I do like Panic Room, it wasn't a film that blew me away. I think the thing that caught me about Panic Room was everybody wanted their own Panic Room after seeing it. And actually, I knew people that actually built Panic Rooms in their house.
See, Panic Room for me felt like
a lesser film.
It is. It felt like almost an experiment in style that was no more than that in a way.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it wasn't, you know, after Fight Club, or at least for me, after Fight Club, you were just expecting, you know, it's really like I feel like a spoiled child saying this, but you expect the world to be delivered to you by David Fincher after works like Seven, The Game, and Fight Club. And Panic Room is really, you know, speaking of a genre film, that's exactly what it is.
You mentioned The Game, and another movie that surprises you, because the whole movie is this elevating sense of gloom in the movie, and the surprise of the ending is that it's so hopeful.
Yeah,
it's a completely happy ending.
Yes,
I mean, another way that he turns expectations on their head. We have Dean on the phone. I think this is Dean. Let me pick it up. Dean, you're on the line.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, man.
Hey, it's nice to talk to you guys. Nice to talk to you, Jerry, and
absolutely,
Jamie. It's good to. I've been enjoying the show for the past few weeks.
No, thank
you so much. Thank you so much for listening in. We appreciate it.
We do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. But of course, I wanted to call in about this because this is definitely the definition of a new classic.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny. You were just talking about Fincher's move, if you want to say, and I have a theory about Fincher. I think that he does one popcorn movie. He started off with kind of a popcorn movie, that is Alien 3. And then I think he does something serious and a little bit heavier, maybe something that people might not get into, you know, but he does it for himself. So if you look at his thing, it kind of goes back and forth pretty stringently like that. Mm-hmm. You have Alien 3, and then you have 7, and then you have The Game, but then you have Fight Club, and then you have Panic Room, but then you have Zodiac.
You're right.
And then you have Benjamin Button. And so we can expect the social what's it called? The social
network. Now let's talk. I want to talk about the social network because I am very curious because it's written by Aaron Sorkin and it's based on, I will say it, Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, the creator of Facebook, is a very controversial figure. Mm-hmm. He has said some things in the last year. I mean, I am at odds with him on his views on privacy. I don't make.
Yeah, we actually talked about this last week.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what the movie's going to be about, right?
And actually, because we're talking about what the tone of it would be, that's the question you asked, and I think Dean has just kind of answered that.
Yeah.
In a weird way. Yeah.
No. So Dean, please elaborate on what you think, because this is a big question mark. I'm curious how Fincher is going to, because I like Zodiac. I mean, this is based on a real life character, someone who's actually really of the moment right now.
Well, in each of these, Fight Club and the 3, that is 7, Fight Club, and Zodiac. Mm-hmm. I'm saying the 3 personal projects. They're all in some ways about a death and a rebirth kind of way. You really have to stretch. But it's not really a stretch, really. It's all about a death of something and a rebirth of something, you know. With 7, it's obviously about death in a major way, but it's also about Morgan Freeman's slight rebirth into believing in something.
Right.
And then in Fight Club, of course, obviously the rebirth of Edward Norton's character, and then in Zodiac, it's kind of about Zodiac's really about sort of male identity, I think.
It is.
And it's about sort of a changing of male identity. And so I think this is going to be about the death of an old way of life, an old way. It's going to be the death of an old way of relating with people,
right?
And the rebirth into a new way of relating with people.
No, that's a great point. That's a really awesome point.
Yeah, and if you think about these movies that you've mentioned, 7, Fight Club, Zodiac, they're really kind of, in a way, they work on a cerebral level, and they're about primal themes.
Yeah.
I mean, 7 being about, evil, sin. It's about sin. Zodiac, I think, is about obsession.
Without a doubt,
more than anything else.
Yeah.
And Fight Club about identity.
About male identity in the turn of the century, really.
And in between, like a Panic Room, he does these little movies that work like toys, you know.
Yeah, they're
He's
like
toys.
They're like contraptions, really, like Rube Goldberg sort of contraptions, really.
You think that about Benjamin Button?
Well, Benjamin Button is kind of the one. I really try and think of them more as popcorn movies. That is, movies for a more general audience.
Yeah.
Well, he does one for the business and one for himself. And
that's a really good point, Dean. That's a great point.
I think that's the way. It's really the way to think about it. Benjamin Button, which is definitely for me the lesser of all of his movies. I know that it has some people who love it, but it just seems like Forrest Gump again to me.
No, that's a valid point. No, what I like about Benjamin Button, it seems like we're all waiting for Brad Pitt to become Brad Pitt.
Well, that's what's really strange about it is, you know, we kind of just sitting there waiting for Brad Pitt to become the young Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
The old Brad Pitt is like, whatever. But the young Brad Pitt is what we're kind of really kind of want to see.
You know, when she says let's fuck it, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the funniest moments in the movie. When they finally do it.
Well, because you are waiting for that moment.
Yeah, you're waiting for that moment.
Benjamin Button moves me. And
it does. I agree. Yeah, I like Benjamin Button. I know a lot of people don't, or it's the in thing to say they don't like it, but I can't help but be moved by it.
I'm very moved by it because it's a.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because there's something about it, the measure of a life, and you know, ceasing those moments, and I can't. It's something that can't be articulated. It's almost bigger than words with me. It's like a feeling that the movie has. I can't. Immortality, or I don't know.
For me, it's just you know, there's only two parts of the movie that really work for me. The whole scenes with Tilda Swinton, which are really great.
They are.
And then about the last 15 minutes, I think it really comes into something quite different when he's devolving into a child. Or evolving or whatever. But I have a problem with just the whole concept of the movie in general, because I don't think that it. Well, first of all, I just think that it's too close to Forrest Gump. I mean, I'm sorry, but it just is to me. I mean, the whole Jared Harris character is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's even driving a boat and stuff. So I mean,
no, I understand that. I mean, you're not the first. I mean, obviously that was a film that people compared it to when it came out. I think the last image, the last shot of the clock and the flood, is for me. I'm not. I mean, I don't know. Of the films nominated that year, though, I'm not. I have to say it was of the films nominated, not of the films. Of the films nominated, that was my favorite film.
What year was that? Was that 2000?
That was 2008. But that last image was haunting with the water coming in, the clock, and regardless of what you think about the film, I just thought that's quite a last image. I know
that's just the sense of time.
Yeah.
I mean, and if the movie's about anything, that's what it's about time, and how much time we have, and how time washes everything away anyway.
Yeah.
So living in the moment, and that's what I thought was so special about the character of Benjamin Button, is that he had it from the beginning, living in the moment.
Right.
Well, I think that's the same thing with Forrest Gump, though. I mean, I think Forrest Gump is always living in the moment because he doesn't really have the intellect to he doesn't really have the intellect to do anything else but live in the moment. So I think, it is tired to say, it's like Forrest Gump and everything, but it's still there to me.
Lots of movies are about the same thing. It's how it's about it.
Well, this is true, but I'll give you another thing that I really don't like about the movie. It's just too long. It's
yeah.
Halfway.
Well, it's about time.
Well, it's not Berlin Alexander.
I had that. No, but 3 hours was pretty heavy for that movie, especially for a movie that was based on a short story that probably wasn't more than 7 pages long.
Well, that's true. That's true. We could go on about films that are based on shorter films or shorter works all night.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Dean, what other thoughts do you have about Seven? What pops to mind when you think Seven?
Well, it's funny. I just got finished watching it, and you know that Gwyneth Paltrow does make one more appearance in the movie, right?
Yes.
After the one that you mentioned, which she pops up for like 2 seconds, like a 2-frame shot.
That flash cut.
Yeah, that flash cut. But that's beside the point. What do I think about the number one thing that I think about the movie Seven is, first of all, its bleakness and how amazing it was that the movie was able to achieve a level of success while not giving up anything. I mean, it's definitely the most depressing $100 million hit that's ever been made, I would say. And I mean,
it's uncompromising. That's right. But there are some movies that speak to the time, and I guess that tapped into it. I mean, something like The Dark Knight definitely tapped into the time, and that was as kind of a depressing major blockbuster as you can find. I mean, it's dark, a dark blockbuster.
Yeah.
This is true, and I think that all movies, there are a lot of movies after Seven that have been obviously influenced by it, and I think Dark Knight is maybe one of them. But another thing that I think about is which is related to this. So I got 2 more things, and then I'll let you guys go. But I think about the photography in this movie, and the art direction, and the sound, and the editing are just extraordinary. And Howard Shore's score, which is pretty atonal, and it keeps moving up and moving up and moving up, tones after tone after tone, until it reaches sort of a climax. We've been watching it just right now, and watching the climax of the movie. I felt my heart racing, even though I absolutely know what's going to happen and everything. But there's just something about the confluence of all those things. And you were talking about the quality of the film too. What they did with this film is they took all the silver out of the negative. Yeah. So they could make all the blacks just that much blacker.
And that became a popular process afterwards too.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
You saw a lot of more movies do that. I mean, Payback comes to mind, that Mel Gibson movie.
The remake of Point Blank.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, Seven is also about more than just evil and sin and all of that stuff. To me, it's really about, and especially after I've watched it a few times. Of course, the first time I watched it, I was just blown away by just the story and the sheer, chutzpah of it all. But after watching it a few times, I've realized that it's really about. Okay, here's Morgan Freeman, and he's got this view of the world that's jaded, and he's really done with it. He's seen too much, and he's kind of given up on the world, really. And then here comes this new guy who's cocky, and I like how those scenes with Brad Pitt have a lot of corny lines that he's saying, like, ladies and gentlemen, we have a homicide, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's like he learned everything through television almost.
Yes.
No, you're very right.
And Morgan Freeman just sits there coldly and just listens to it and just rolls his eyes, kind of. To me, it's really about the relationship between those two guys and 2 different mindsets. It's the mindset of the young and the mindset of the old.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that also comes out in a really small scene, which most people don't even think about. But there's a little small scene towards the end of the movie where they've gotten John Doe and everything, and they go to a bar to hang out, and they talk between themselves about this worldview. And and Brad Pitt says, "Well, I don't believe you believe that, and I can't believe in how you see the world, and I won't." And then you have the scene that you played in the beginning of the show inside the car,
right?
And you have to sit and listen to how Kevin Spacey is talking about the world, and you see Morgan Freeman listening to him, and you realize that Freeman and John Doe actually look at the world quite similarly.
Yes.
And
well, that ties back to Sin as well. I mean,
yes.
how each one chooses what their relationship to that is.
Yes. Yeah. So it's like to me, it's the hallmark of a great movie is that it's about many different things all at once, you know, and
I also like the in terms of speaking about the police procedural, that kind of thing. I also like the insight that Morgan Freeman gives, where he's saying, you know, where he intones that they're not going to prevent anything.
Right.
They're just following the killer's lead. We're just following clues from, you know. He knows it's going to end when John Doe wants it to end.
John Doe always has the upper hand, you know.
Yeah.
He always has the upper hand in the movie.
Yeah.
And he's just spent too much time on it for them to even grasp it, you know. I mean,
right.
He's just anybody who can sit and write those you know, books full of things, you know, has and take all those photographs and spend a year, you know, coming up with this plan. You know, it's just too much for any two detectives to.
Did you see the deleted? Did you ever see the deleted scenes from the movie that didn't make the cut?
I remember the scenes at the beginning with him at the house.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing that they cut that, because it's just a good thing that they cut it, because it would have cut into the bleakness of the movie and everything.
Well, it was telling about the life that he can't have. I mean, he's not that person. That would be an unsettling place for him to be. But he's in this completely peaceful country home, and you know that he feels that it's not right for him. When he retires, he's thinking of moving away from everything, the big city violence, but he cuts a piece of wallpaper from the wall, and keeps it in his pocket. But I do like the way the movie opens as it is now, which is at a crime scene, dead bodies on the floor. Morgan Freeman asks about the girl, I think, the little girl. Did she see it before she was killed? And the younger cop's like, does she see it? What's up with these questions?
We'll be glad when you're gone. Yeah.
That says just with that opening scene and that first line you have, that says so much about his character, where he is.
It does, and I like the questioning of, like, where is this guy going to go now and everything. You know, as opposed to having any kind of idea that you know, he has some kind of plan or whatever, and you know, you kind of get that same thing that you know, that he could have chosen a different life, but he couldn't really. He couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't the person that he was, and you kind of get that in the Gwyneth Paltrow thing. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is really good in those few scenes that she's in too.
She is very good.
I actually like one of her great performances. Besides, like, the Royal Tenenbaums and Hard 8, I really love her.
She's very pure. I mean, she exemplifies purity in the movie.
And you really have to hand it to her too, because she only gets about 2 or 3 scenes tops. You know, and she makes so much of an impression, but not too much of an impression, because she doesn't stay on your mind enough so that you're
thinking that she plays into the plot as
into the plot, right? Exactly. Yeah. It's actually also partially the direction in the writing too. You know.
Right. And there's also the little character touches for Brad Pitt, like that I love. Like his tie is already pre-tied, so he just has to put it on. And when he says you want some wine, when they're going over the phone,
that big old glass of
he
wine.
pours up the
Really
glass,
funny.
and Morgan Freeman kind of looks at it. There's little moments in the movie that are just great.
Yeah, I do. I do like that little thing when he picks up the glass when the place was shaking and picks up the glass.
Yeah.
There's lots of little moments like that are really good. And
well, Dean, please call in future shows, man.
Yeah, please. I really enjoyed this. This is wonderful.
Oh man, thanks. I really appreciate it. Well, you guys keep on doing it, and I'll keep on tuning in.
All right, cool.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you. Have a great night, Dean.
You too.
Okay, we got another caller, Jerry, on the line.
Okay. Do we know who this is?
No.
Oh, we don't? Okay, this makes it even more exciting.
Let me put on my Kreskin hat.
I know. This is our tribute to the great Buck Howard. No.
Yes. It's a 310 area code. I'm bringing it up now. 310.
Hello.
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 Hey, this is Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey,
Craig.
Craig.
I'm from L.A., and I really love your show. And
thank you,
man.
Yeah, I just want to say the great thing about Seven for me is, unlike typical slasher killer films, is you never see any of the murders. And what you do is you come upon the scene with the detectives, and you witness this really freaky murder scene, and your imagination kind of takes over and imagines what this guy did to these people, which really plays into the kind of like the real dark, freaky tone of the film.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
You don't see a murder until Kevin Spacey shoots, or Brad Pitt shoots Kevin Spacey at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that is something really significant about the movie, because a lot of people were sold on the idea, and still are, that the movie is grisly, but it's not grisly for what it shows you necessarily.
Yeah, I think one's imagination can imagine much worse things than you can actually show on film, and I think that that's really a virtue of that film, which really makes it, you come upon a scene and you see how, like the guy that was malnourished with all those little tree carts and things, and then or how that one girl's eyes were cut out. It was really, really bizarre.
Right.
You're right. It's a shame because God, this movie is 15 years old now, and since then, one of the, it's funny, the films always take, when they copy from a great film, they always take the wrong lessons from the films. They have to show you, there's a lot of films that will show you the acts being done.
Right.
Or everyone took the wrong lesson from Jaws. Show the monster often and early.
Right.
And, it happens all the time. They always copy the wrong aspects of the film that made it so great in the first place. And that's a very good point.
I mean, even the head in the box.
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine a slasher movie. I mean, they cut right to that head in the box. All you see is a little blood stain on.
Yeah.
And they give you that quick kind of blurb of Gwyneth Paltrow's face, and that's all you see.
Mm-hmm.
Like a seminal shot of her. And the great thing about it too is Brad Pitt plays kind of a naive cop, while Morgan Freeman's this veteran, and I think the killer used his naivete to manipulate him, kill him at the end to become, Wrath at the end, which was a great twist. I mean, that whole movie is just fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Especially
and how Morgan Freeman never underestimates John Doe, and Brad Pitt is very quick to do just that, to try to cut him down to your T-shirt, your movie of the week.
Yeah, that whole dialogue sequence in the car when they're going out to the field.
Yeah. And
they're just battling wits, and then Morgan Freeman's kind of staring at Brad Pitt.
Let me throw something out, because it is something that's brought. There is empathy, not towards what he's done, but his victims in some sense. When he's talking about the lawyer specifically, like you all, you secretly applaud me for doing this,
right?
Because no one likes the rich lawyer. And it's an interesting foreshadowing, not that Andrew Kevin Walker or David Fincher knew that a year later we would be talking about the Unabomber.
Right.
And the publication of his manifesto. And as horrific as it is, people did say, one of the common things was, if he wasn't so crazy and if he didn't murder his people, there's actually there's a logic to his madness, to what he's trying to say. Right. And it's something I couldn't help thinking about while revisiting the film. I was thinking about the Unabomber. There is a logic within what he's doing. A sick logic, but there is it does make sense in some way. There is a weird sort of empathy in what he's doing. It's just the way he's doing it, obviously, is horrific and grisly and unforgivable, but you can see what he's trying to get at.
And it's also a logic that Morgan Freeman returns to by the very end of the movie as his reasoning for staying and fighting sin. There's a real point of contention about the movie. I think everyone agrees that the head in the box makes it memorable. I can understand why in the development of it they were shaky about it.
Right.
But the big argument about it is that last line in voiceover. I forget who he's quoting.
Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a beautiful place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
Exactly.
A lot of people thought that was completely unnecessary. I think Roger Ebert led that charge. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think it sums up the film beautifully.
I think it really ties it up.
Yeah.
And then you see the credits go the other way, which the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels kind of like it feels like an afterthought.
Yeah.
I mean, you get the idea that he's going to stick around when he says, "Where are you going to be? I'll be around. I'll be around."
Right.
I think that's probably a more haunting way to end the movie than it feels. It does feel tacked on to me. It doesn't bother me to the point of oh my God, it ruined the experience.
No, it doesn't ruin. Not at all. I actually think it's a very good way. I actually think it's really sums. I have to say, I do think that sums up the movie, and at least Morgan Freeman's world view at the end. I've never had a problem with that. I didn't realize Ebert had a problem with that.
Did Ebert not give it a thumbs down, or?
No. I think he gave it 3.5 stars.
Oh, great.
In his written review.
Yeah.
But he gave the same rating to the Flintstones. So I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's funny you guys are talking about
Flintstones. Has a lot.
I don't know. I picked a movie, man. I don't know. What do you want from me? Soul Plane. What do you want?
Well, it's funny that you guys are talking about 8mm because when I saw the film, I was disappointed. But then I read.
So was I. I mean,
Andrew Kevin Walker's original draft, and his original draft is great.
Mm-hmm.
And so it tells me what is written not always ends up on the screen.
No,
the producer wants changes, the director's want changes, the actor wants changes, and it's kind of going back to Seven, where I understand David Fincher, basically shot the first draft.
He wouldn't take any other draft. He wanted
behind the studio's back. He shot the ending.
Yeah,
he kept it a secret from them.
Thank God.
And there are many different endings. Some just storyboarded. Yeah. I mean, with Mills getting shot, or so they made the right choice. And even Fincher's thinking was, look, and he says this on the DVD. He says, 50 years from now, when people have a fuzzy idea of the movie, the one thing that they'll remember is, remember that crazy Head in the Box movie from years ago?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just the stars aligned. It was the right script with the right director with the right cast, and it was just one of those. They caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, they really did.
And just redefined that genre for me. I actually went back and saw it the next week when it came out in the theaters because I was just so blown away by it. Yeah.
Now, have you seen Hardcore?
I saw Hardcore a long time ago, but it's with George C. Scott.
Right.
It's a great film.
It is.
I love it too. I recommend it to everybody. Especially when 8mm comes up, I recommend Hardcore.
Oh, it's a great thing to bring up.
Well, all those films from the late 60s to mid-70s is the greatest period for American filmmaking for me. We had Midnight Cowboy, Deliverance, Chinatown, Last Picture Show, all those
Without
films.
a doubt.
Yeah,
Without a doubt.
And back then, the protagonist would sometimes die in the end, and it was a great ending. And you very rarely see that now.
No, you don't.
I think Fincher would fit in very well in the 70s. Those were probably the movies that he was most influenced by. But if you think about the uncompromising nature of Seven, and if you think about all the President's Men aspect of Zodiac, a lot of his stuff rings to those masterful movies back in the 70s.
Yeah, that's why he's one of my favorite directors now.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Craig, man, thank you so much for tuning in. How did you find out about our show? Was it Facebook?
Actually, a good friend of mine is Jim Vines, and we're both screenwriters out here in L.A., so since that point, I've been listening to your show, and, you start talking about Seven. It's one of my favorite movies, so I decided to give you a call.
Well, if you were to recommend another new classic, or a classic, because we have an Inside the Classic series, too, what would you recommend to us?
Off the top of my head, I love the foreign film La Femme, Nikita by Luc Besson.
Well, that would definitely be right up my alley, so I agree. Yeah.
Good choice.
That's an awesome choice.
And for an action film, I think Die Hard is one of the greatest action films.
Oh, yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
So, those are two off the top of my head.
Well, those are very good choices.
Yeah, those are good. I like the idea of a Die Hard show.
Sure.
Yeah, Die Hard. So think about how influential Die Hard is. Everything is Die Hard on this, Die Hard in this, Die Hard.
Yes, you're right.
Alan Rickman is one of the greatest screen villains ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another example of something so different from the norm.
Right.
Die Hard is like, or Step Up is like Die Hard in a dance floor. Actually, Die Hard would be. Is McTiernan out of prison yet? I'd love to get him.
Oh God. Boy, I feel so bad for that guy right now. I actually worked with him on Last Action Hero as a technical advisor, so I got to work with him.
Really?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, that was kind of that's a whole nother story I worked on that. I got a lot of stories in that one, so maybe for now.
Well, when we do the new classics, Last Action Hero, we want to have you
definitely
back.
Coming on.
Okay, I'd love to.
Now, my older brother is a big fan of Last Action Hero. He always claims it was misunderstood, so you will find no bigger fan of that film than him.
Oh, great, fantastic.
Craig, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, have a great night, and thanks for tuning in.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, good callers. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Thank you both for calling in. It's wonderful when we get callers and,
I actually like the way
they're not pranks.
They're not pranks. They're not talking about how well endowed they are. So I always appreciate that.
Remember, we used to be so scared about taking a phone call. But this is good. This is
respectable.
Very good.
It's very reassuring.
Yeah. So, I guess in closing, final thoughts about Seven. How do you find that Seven is thought of or remembered or looked back upon? Do you find that it's still in the conversation, that film?
It's still in the conversation. I think all you have to do, in all seriousness, is go back to the spring of 2001 and look at the two films that came out then. Along Came a Spider and Hannibal.
Right.
And how they really they brought the serial killer film back to where it unfortunately was before Silence of the Lambs or Seven. Mm-hmm. They really sort of, because I actually think even though Along Came the Spider is the first book in that series, I actually thought Kiss the Girls was the better movie, and that actually comes later. I actually thought Morgan Freeman was just a much better film, and I thought Along Came a Spider was just pretty awful, but Hannibal really, I know people there, it has its fans and everything, but even as a book, I thought it wasn't very good for that worth of wait to get through, and you get to it and you're just like, you've got to be kidding me. On the movie, it was a long way to go for, I forget what the last line was exactly, but it just doesn't work.
Especially and it's a Morgan Freeman vehicle, Yeah. So for him to have been involved in a movie like Seven that was so groundbreaking.
Yeah, and then he's in this as so run-of-the-mill.
Yeah. I thought Along Came Polly was more groundbreaking than Along Came
I thought Along Came Polly had the funniest lines I heard in a movie. In
that's a new classic.
That is definitely a new classic. No, but I think Seven is going to be, because it's Fincher, and I think one of the most important things is you realize with Seven, wow, we're dealing with someone who actually has a vision, who has a style, and that becomes apparent more in The Game and Fight Club and Zodiac. But Seven is really you're witnessing the birth of an auteur. I think I don't think that's out of the question. It also forces you to go back and look at Alien 3.
And there was a reassessment of Alien 3 following 7.
Yeah, it was unavoidable because you're like, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And and I think the problem with Alien 3 is, look, Alien 3 comes after Aliens, and that's a hard film to live up to. Anything.
It came what? It came 7 years after Aliens.
I think it was in 92, 80.
6 years.
Yeah, 86 is like 6-7 years. So it's it's going to be hard to. It's a different. What's very interesting about the 4 Alien films, I don't include the Alien versus Predator. I really don't care about those. But the 4 Alien films, each one has a distinct voice, distinct style, distinct everything, and Fincher's really responsible, kind of for like, wow, all right, he's taking it in a completely different direction, and it's through 7 that you're forced to go back, I think, and look at that, like, okay, this guy's really someone to watch out for, and here we are after Besson.
Yeah. And I don't think that Alien 3 its failure is necessarily his fault. I mean, I think he's the first person to say that movie was heavily compromised.
It sounds like it was. I mean,
beyond his control.
Yeah, I don't think he had any control really.
Right.
And it's not a bad. None of them are bad. The Alien, and I like the one that the guys from Delicatessen, City of Lost Children did. The 4th one, it has its virtues too. But it's hard to live in James Cameron's shadow. It really is hard to.
Yeah.
Aliens, I think, is one of those things that I think sometimes is better than the. It's one of those things where the sequel is better than the original. And I love the original Alien, but the Aliens is just so much. It's a lot of fun.
It's adrenaline. It's an adrenaline shot.
You're right. Absolutely
both of those movies are completely different. So depending on what mood you're in, that's the better movie. But it's like apples and oranges, really.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. I think 7 is there's nothing. I think 7 is aged very well. Like I said, I watched it a couple of weeks ago, and it really has aged very well. And the other thing I can't get over, and I know it's a trivial point, how young Brad Pitt is, how childlike almost compared to
Hotshot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
It hasn't aged at all, and it says something about a movie that it's got enough stuff in it to discover that exactly where it's going. Unlike the experience of watching it for the first time, exactly where it's going, and yet there's so much nourishment in that movie. I mean, there's so much to chew on that film, and to cherish. So hopefully we illuminated some of that stuff on tonight's show.
Hopefully, yes.